So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to I-10 Second Thursday at Venture Cafe. My name is Melissa Grizzle, and I'm the Director of Entrepreneur Development with I-10. We do programming pretty much every month on Second Thursday at Venture Cafe. We took a break last month to regroup in the middle of all of this crazy, but we've been partnering with Venture Cafe on a monthly basis ever since they opened in the fall of 2014. So excited to have G.V. Freeman, one of our mentors, here this evening. And I think we have a couple other folks from the I-10 staff on with us. Our executive director, Mary Louise Helwig, is on the session, and our business development manager, Connie Gallagher, I think is on here as well. When GV is done at the end of the hour too, we'll have a little bit extra time for those of you who aren't familiar with I-10 and have questions about who we are, what we're up to. We can stick around and field those as well. We're real brief overview is we're a nonprofit that helps connect tech startups to everything they need from while they're working from idea stage through to raising outside capital and growing and scaling. So we have a number of different programs and primarily serve the tech entrepreneur in the St. Louis region and have since 2008. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to GV. He's one of our mentors. He comes to us with a plethora of wisdom and knowledge and experience in being an entrepreneur and helping entrepreneurs. And so he's very familiar with lots of different pathways. And he's going to talk about the stuff that nobody ever likes to tell you is on the road ahead of you, and just make you feel a little bit more like, oh, I'm not the only one feeling this way. So anyway, GV, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining. It's a pleasure to speak and mentor for I-10, and it's a pleasure to, hopefully I at least allow somebody to take something away today that this presentation usually goes one of two ways for people. Usually it's oh man, I'm so glad to hear that because now I don't feel so alone. Or this is the dream killer presentation because there's some stuff in here that people don't necessarily love to hear. And I find that a lot of entrepreneurs get so far down the path, and at some point in time they turn around and they look backwards and they say, man, if only I would have known this ahead of time, maybe I wouldn't have done it, or maybe I wouldn't have gone down the path in this way. So I would just tell you to keep an open mind throughout the presentation. I want to try and keep this to about 40 minutes or so. If you have questions, please leave those in the chat. Melissa's going to keep an eye on the chat. I'll probably try and get through a good portion of the presentation. If I do happen to see something pop up on chat, I will try and address it. But if you do have anything that you'd like to share with the group, just put it in chat and we'll catch those towards the end. So as Melissa mentioned, these are at least 10 things. These are the top 10 things that people don't really like to talk about. And they're super important. So we're going to dive right in. I guess just a little bit about me. I've spent about 20 years in marketing, product, and sales, especially in the technology world. The last 6 years or so, 6-7 years, I've spent a lot of work in self-care, and that has become part of my kind of coaching regimen. I really try and help founders not only build and launch and grow their technology products, but also to take care of themselves and somewhat be happy in the process. I created a curriculum called the Product Founder's Journey, wrote a book called the SaaS Field Manual. You're welcome to go to my website and grab a copy of that. And then, as I mentioned over on the right-hand side, I'm a really devoted yogi. I'm a certified yoga teacher. I teach a lot of mindfulness, and I really try and blur the lines between what it's like to work and what it's like to live, because we really only have one life. And this concept of work-life balance, I think, is a flawed concept. The idea, if I was walking across a big waterfall on a tightrope, and this idea that I have this stick in my hands, and if I lean too far over, I'm in the work world, and if I lean too far over, I'm in my personal life. think is a really challenging thing for a lot of entrepreneurs. So what I like to focus on is integrating, and I do that kind of using the 80-20 rule, that we spend 80% of our time building our business and 20% of our time in self-care. And we can talk about that at the end of the session. That's not what this presentation is going to specifically be about. One quick thing. So this is kind of a motto and a creed that I use. And I would tell you that if you are launching a product, maybe it's your pre-revenue, so you don't have a product in the market, or maybe you are just launching your product and you would like access to the curriculum that I created. So again, it's called the Product Founder's Journey, and it covers a whole bunch of marketing and strategy and all sorts of information to get you to launch. If you're interested in that, just post something either on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or Facebook and use the hashtag Stop Crushing It. So this is kind of the antithesis of the Gary Vaynerchuk crush it mentality, all of the bro culture that we see coming out of Silicon Valley. Really what I'm trying to do is promote a little bit more healthy workplace environment and healthy founder community. So if you use that, I will pick one person that uses the hashtag, and I will be happy to give you a copy of the course at no charge. So with that said, let's dive in. The first one, number 10, I say that starting a business is a game that can only be played and never won. And this is really true, especially if you are starting a brand new business, that everybody thinks that all I got to do is get to market. All I got to do is win my first customer. All I got to do is launch my product. All I got to do is build my website. And the problem is that the goalposts are always changing. And the reality is we never end the game. Like there is no fourth quarter when we're talking about startups. Every time we achieve something, there is always something next to do. And one of the best diagrams that I've ever seen for this is what I'm showing you right now. It's called the emotional journey of creating anything great. And if it's small for you, I apologize. But over here on the left-hand side, it says, this is the best idea ever. And over on the right-hand side, it says, this is one of the things I am most proud of. But down in the bottom is the dark swamp of despair. And I will tell you that when you are looking at startups and people are sharing about their startups and their successes and their journeys, I'm telling you that you really only hear about the both sides. You hear about this is the best idea ever, and you hear about this is one of the things I am most proud of. Very rarely do you actually hear about the swamp of despair. And it happens, I would say, in every startup. In some level, in some way, shape, or form, you are going to hit this point. And it's super important to know that it's coming and to know what you can do to get yourself out of it. And that's going to require community. It's going to require communities like the one that I-10 builds and the support that they provide. Because if you don't have any kind of community or any kind of resources around you, and you hit that swamp of despair, it's going to be a really challenging time, both business-wise and personally. I recommend, and I'm going to talk about it a little later, but I recommend that founders find coaches and therapists, because your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend should not be the people that you come home to and unload all of your baggage, because it's a lot of baggage. And co-founder stress, something that we're going to talk about in a little bit, also contributes to this. So keep this in mind. Next up, startups require more time, energy, and money than you might expect. Oftentimes, 2 or 3 times or even more than you might expect. So I like to say that we have, as founders, we really have 3 resources. We have money, energy, and time. And those are incredibly limited resources. You need to be very careful how you spend your money, energy, and time. And what I find is that people will devote a lot more, if they have it, they will devote a lot more money to a problem that shouldn't be devoted. They will devote a lot more time to something, and they will keep continuing to try and figure something out when all they should do is just raise their hand and say, I don't know. And as entrepreneurs, we tend to do that. We really like to dive in. We like to try and figure out our own problems. And I'm telling you that if you're not careful, you will end up spending massive amounts of time and money and energy trying to get your product launched. I've worked with an organization that spent $250,000 launching an MVP that honestly should have never been launched. Like, they didn't even go out and do any of the competitive research. They didn't really go out and figure out what their potential prospects and customers needed. And as a result of that, they spent enormous amounts of money, and they'll probably never make it back. So I think that you just have to know ahead of time that it's going to be a lot harder and a lot longer than you might expect. This is one of my favorites. Co-founders are second marriages, and the divorce can oftentimes be a lot worse. So, I think that if you've ever been through a separation, and I haven't, but if you've ever been through a separation and you have to figure out your custody plan with your children, I think that that's a lot of the times the way it feels when you have to divide up an organization and a business with a co-founder. I have worked with a number of co-founders over the years that really struggle with each other. And I like to tell people that getting a co-founder should be like a dating process. When you start dating someone, you don't show up on the first date and say, "Will you marry me?" And I could say that the same way with sales. So you don't show up to a prospect's doorstep and say, "Will you buy?" on the first meeting. And I would tell you to do the same thing if you're looking for a co-founder. If you need to find somebody to get your startup off the ground, figure out a dating plan. In fact, I offer something in my Product Founders Journey course, and it's free. If you go to productfoundersjourney.com, you can get a co-founder kind of assessment, and you and your co-founder can go through a lot of those questions, and you can sort of start to date over the course of a couple of months. And then if you agree on a lot of stuff, and if you have the same vision, if you have the same values, then go ahead and move forward with a partnership. What I find most often is that co-founders have the skills that each other needs. So one person might be the visionary and another person might be the technical co-founder. So I've got an idea and I've got somebody to build it. And they say, "Hey, that's great. We have the right skills. Let's move forward." But they only realize later that their values don't really line up. And values are incredibly important, not only when you're working side by side every day, but also as you're creating an organization. The values that you have as co-founders end up creating the culture that will eventually be imbued into your software startup. So, or startup of any kind, really. So just make sure that you know who your co-founder is, and make sure that you are ready to go into business with that person, because it could be a long haul, and getting a divorce can be pretty painful. Number 7, when the going gets tough, you're going to stop doing the things that make you feel good. And I think that we're in a really unique time right now where people have been swinging back and forth between doing the things that make them feel good and then also like spending enormous amounts of time sitting on the couch or the recliner and eating more crappy food than they usually eat. And in fact, like, I will ask you the question, so you don't have to raise your hand, but I would encourage you to take a look at this list. And I would ask you, have any of these decreased the quality of your life or the life of your loved ones? Now, obviously, people are not doing a lot of in-store shopping, but has your Amazon shopping habits increased over the last 8 weeks? Has your alcohol consumption increased? Has your caffeine consumption increased? Maybe you are actually working out far more. Most of the people that I talk to right now are not working out quite as much. But what ends up happening is that when we get in stressful situations, a lot of times our routine breaks down and we give up the things that make us feel the best. So when I have a really stressful day at work, what do? I go to the pub, I have a couple of drinks. I don't go work out, even though that I should. Or I have caffeine, or I have sugar, or I have unhealthy food. And what happens is when you are a founder and when you're creating your own business, especially in the beginning, the hard days are going to outnumber the good days. So you really have to build in a routine as you're getting things started, because without that routine, a lot of this stuff is going to kind of pop its ugly head up, and it will encourage you to start dropping some of the really positive behavior. And this kind of bleeds right into that. It's going to be a lot harder and it's going to be a lot lonelier than you think. A big shout out to I-10 and St. Louis actually has an incredible entrepreneur scene, and Venture Cafe, and all of the organizations that really try and bring founders together on a very regular basis, whether those are tech founders or not. Even Venture Cafe doing what we're doing right now of giving people this opportunity to connect with other founders is super important, because there's going to be not only business questions that you don't know the answer to, but there's going to be moments when you just feel like you have lost your way. I had been advising and helping founders for probably close to 7 or 8 years. And then I finally decided to take the leap and start building my own product. And it was amazing to me that when I started to feel all of the same things that the founders that I had been coaching, I started to feel the same things that they had been talking about. And, you know, the challenging thing is when you're in the picture, it's hard to see the frame. So when I was inside of it, even knowing and even coaching other founders outside of that frame, it was really challenging for me to see what was happening inside of my own head and inside of my own psyche. So it's really, really important to get a community around you, because it's going to be lonely, especially if you don't have a co-founder. If you do have a co-founder, that will help if you're getting along. If you're not getting along, then you're probably going to want to seek out other other founders, other people like those in I-10, to try and figure out how you're feeling, and at least maybe apply some salve to some of the wounds that you're experiencing on a pretty regular basis. You know, every time you don't get a deal, when you don't make the sale, it's a challenge and it's lonely if you're the only salesperson. So connecting with another salesperson at Venture Cafe, connecting with another salesperson at I-10 is going to be super important. So make sure that you know this ahead of time and have a great support structure. Here's some data on what it's like for entrepreneurs. So this is from a study called Are Entrepreneurs Touched with Fire? And when we talk about loneliness, that's just one feeling that might pop up. But here are some of the actual medical evidence that we see coming out of research, where entrepreneurs are 2 times more likely to report having a mental health condition. We are 2 times more likely to suffer from depression, 6 times more likely to suffer from ADHD, 3 times more likely to suffer from substance abuse, 10 times more likely to suffer from bipolar disorder, 2 times more likely to have a psychiatric hospitalization, and 2 times more likely to have suicidal thoughts. All of those stats are really scary. And especially when you don't have a team around you, if you're trying to do it all alone, if you don't have a therapist or a coach or a mentor or a co-founder, all of these things can manifest in some pretty bad behavior. And we want to try and prevent that as much as possible. Number 5 is you'll probably develop your product too early. I would say 97 out of 100 entrepreneurs that I work with and that I coach, they have already built their product before they have validated anything. They have built their product in their head. Sometimes if you're a developer, if you're a technical co-founder, you have sat down on a Saturday night and you have started to write code or build your app before you've ever talked to a prospect, before you have ever done any market research, before you have ever done any competitive research. And I would tell you, if you have the skills to be able to develop a product and you're just doing it for fun, I say go for it. Like, do it for fun, but don't be surprised after you have this great idea and you talk to your best friend or a family member that says, I really wish that you could solve this problem for me. And you go out and spend a whole bunch of time building it. And then in about 3 weeks, you start looking around and you find that there's already 3 competitors and you just didn't hit the 2nd or 3rd page of Google, or you weren't searching for it in quite the right way. And most people, whether it's in their head or whether they pay a consultant or whether they start developing it themselves, they're going to develop their product too early. The product's going to be bigger than it should be. So I would encourage you to read something like The Lean Startup, try and build as few features as you possibly can to get your product into the market, and determine whether or not people are going to buy it before you spend a bunch of money. In fact, I call it a minimum viable concept. A lot of you are probably familiar with the idea of a minimum viable product. And when I think of an MVP, I do think of code that has been written and that people can actually use in somewhat of a normal fashion online. So what I refer to it as the MVC, or the minimum viable concept. And that could be a Kickstarter campaign or a landing page or an AdWords campaign where you are determining whether or not people are interested in your idea and what you have to offer before you ever write a line of code. There's probably 10 different ways that I could tell you to build an MVC that will prove out whether or not you have some level of interest or market before you ever have to start writing a line of code, before you have to find a technical co-founder, before you have to hire a development company that's going to charge you $10 to $50 to $100,000. So be careful to not develop your product too early. Number 4, demand and competition, or lack thereof, are frequently imagined and rarely researched. And this is exactly what I was referring to in the previous example, is you have a great idea, a family member, a friend says, oh, I know that you can build apps. What do you think about building an app for this specific thing or to solve this problem? And you're like, oh, that's a great idea. We should do that. So you go into business together with your friend, and maybe you buy a domain name and you actually incorporate and you start building the product, and you haven't done any research with prospects. You haven't done any research with competition. And I would tell you that the 2 main places that people skimp on that they should not are those 2 pieces of research. Figure out what your prospects want and figure out what the market demands. So what you are actually looking for is a term called product market fit. A lot of people also think that you have to have a product in the market before you can find product market fit. And I would tell you that's really untrue. If you go back to the minimum viable concept that I just talked about, you can actually begin to find some level of product market fit before you ever launch anything. So I'll give you an example. I developed the course that I created, and I really didn't do a ton of competitive research, because I was really just building it for myself. It was really more fun than it was anything else. But what I was able to do is run a couple of AdWords campaigns, and I was able to see which titles converted better than other titles. And through that small AdWords campaign, $100 or less, I was able to see that the product founder's journey converted better than many of the other titles that I thought of. In fact, that is the same way that Tim Ferriss figured out the title for his book, The 4-Hour Workweek. He ran Google AdWords campaigns. This has been probably 12, 15 years ago when he released that book. He ran Google AdWords campaigns to determine which ones converted the most. In fact, he did the same thing when he wrote The 4-Hour Body. The 4-Hour Body had nothing to do with 4 hours, but it converted higher than the rest of them. So he named the next book, The 4-Hour Body. So there's a lot of ways that you can do some product market fit research, some demand generation, some competition. The one thing that you probably can't do before you have a product, it's going to be a lot more challenging to get people to actually give you a credit card or pay or want to sign up for your product if it doesn't exist yet. So you can get a whole bunch of people to convert, and they might be really interested in what you have to offer, but they're not actually willing to completely convert. They're not actually willing to give you a credit card. That last step is going to be really hard to do until you have a product in the market. Here's a graph that tells you why the top 10 reasons startup fail. And the very, very top one is no market need. And if you want more information on product market fit, there's the Andreessen Horowitz VC firm has an incredible blog post on product market fit. If you just type in Andreessen Horowitz product market fit, it'll come up on Google. I would encourage you to do that if you're considering launching a startup, if you're in the very early stages. Number 3, this is actually one of my favorite movies, but if you build it, they will come as a plot line and it's not a business plan. And maybe you have even figured out that you have some level of product market fit. Maybe you have done competitive research. Maybe you have done all of your prospect research and you're building a product that is useful and has demand in the market. And I would tell you that one of the key components to product market fit is demand. To kind of go back to the previous slide, sorry for skipping around a little bit, but one of the things that people forget about a lot is demand. You might find a market that actually has a problem and you can solve that problem. You have demonstrated that the market has a problem and you have an answer to that problem. So you say, I'm going to build it, I'm going to solve the problem. That is fantastic. You have solved a problem, but if people don't demand that problem to be solved, then you don't have product market fit yet. The market has to demand you solving that problem. And that's gonna be what's a little bit tricky to figure out until you start asking people for money. But if you build it, they will come as a plot line and it's not a business plan. Once you do have your product in the market, everybody thinks that all I gotta do is just launch it on the App Store. All I gotta do is just fire up my website and make a couple of social media posts or write a couple of blog articles or jump on a podcast and everybody is going to come rushing to my product. If we go all the way back to the beginning, that slide with the swamp of despair, like you might be starting to come out of the swamp of despair and on your way up the right-hand side, but there is a tremendous amount of time and effort and money that is required to get your product to market and actually start selling it. Marketing and selling. And I would also tell you, depending on the type of product that you're going to build, at least in the tech industry, if I look at an enterprise product, that's probably 6 to 12 to 18 months sales cycle between when I start contacting somebody to when they actually sign a check. Now, something like Netflix, $15 a month, not a big deal. That would be like a business to consumer, a B2C product. The price point is much lower. That might be a 1 to 24 hour sales cycle. So imagine you just built a big enterprise product and you think that you're just going to fire up your website, do some social media posts and advertise on Facebook. It's going to take anywhere from 6 to 12 to 18 months to begin generating revenue because an enterprise sales cycle is significantly longer. You're going to have somewhere between 3 to 5, maybe even 7 different people involved in that sales process. And you're going to need to get them all to fundamentally sign on to your product before they're going to start scratching you a check. So I would just make sure that you build in time and make sure that you have a runway that gives you an opportunity to build up your sales and marketing. One other note that I often tell people is you can start marketing long before your product is developed. So if you have a product that's in the mix and you are developing it, maybe you've built an MVC and you have some of the content already ready to go, you can build your website, you can start collecting email addresses, you can start going on podcasts and getting some PR. You can do a lot of stuff before your product is ever built. And that's going to basically shorten your sales cycle for some of those first customers. Number 2, on average, there are 12 departments in a typical tech startup. Now, if you are just starting and maybe you're a solo founder, maybe you have a co-founder, maybe there's 3 of you, that doesn't mean that you need 12 people to run a tech startup, but each one of those departments is important. So I'll give you an idea. So this is the Product Founders Journey framework. This is basically the framework that my course was built around. But around the outside are the operational departments of a typical software startup. So we start out at the top with management, and this is going to be your CEO and your CTO. Those are probably the 2 most important roles. And I would say that there are kind of 3 I call them archetypes, but there are 3 types of people that you need to start a software company. At a minimum, you need somebody to be the visionary. They're the person that has an idea. Then you need somebody to build the product. That's going to be your technologist. And then third, you need somebody that I call the rainmaker. They are going to have to sell and market. Now, you might have the visionary and the rainmaker be the same person. So if they are a charismatic individual and they can go out and talk about their big idea and also have some level of competence around selling and marketing, that's great. Then you only need really 2 people. Very rarely do I see one person encompass all 3 of those archetypes. But if we go back to this diagram, for management, you're going to need those 3 archetypes to be a part of your management team. Now, if you don't want a technical co-founder, you're going to have to hire somebody to either build your product for money or build it for equity, however you want to do that, but you're going to have those skills and resources. Next one down is marketing. I put this here, as I just mentioned, you should start marketing your product before it's built. Somebody's going to have to handle all of the information systems. So who's going to set up your website? Who's going to set up your email? Who's going to set up Jira for your developers to track all of their tasks? Who's going to set up HubSpot or your CRM or all of those pieces of technology that you're going to need? That's the information systems department. Product management is really figuring out how your product is going to be architected and built, and also what features go into the product. You are going to need somebody on your legal team. And again, I don't think that you need to hire an attorney, but you are going to have legal expertise somewhere in the organization to help you derive your terms of use, to help you come up with your privacy policy, things like that. User experience are the designers. They're the people who make the product pretty and easy to use. Engineering are your developers. Sales is pretty evident. Customer success. So there is a bridge between sales and support. Most of the time with SaaS products, we have a sales team that sells something, and then if the customer can't implement the product themselves, it's usually handed over to a customer success team. This is a kind of a project management. They're product experts. They're consultants. They go in and figure out what the customer needs and how to implement it with your product. So sales hands it off to customer success. They do the implementation. Customer success then hands them off to support for long-term support issues. You're going to need a finance department, somebody who understands, in theory, QuickBooks or some other finance and accounting system. You're also going to need some resources, probably from an accountant, to help you get everything set up correctly. And then finally, somebody in human resources. You're going to start hiring developers. You're going to start hiring designers as your team grows. So as I mentioned, you don't need 12 people in your company, but these are 12 different departments that you are going to eventually have to have some level of resource. Now, I10, again, is a fantastic organization because they're going to have mentors that are in legal. They're going to have mentors that can help you with HR or for finance or to find an accountant. These are the organizations that are going to help you get started, so you don't have to pay an arm and a leg to go hire an attorney. You might be able to find somebody who can help you relatively on the cheap to get things up and running. But just know that these are the 12 departments that are typically in a larger organization, and you're going to have to fill them one way or another. So the last one, number 1, is there are more unknown unknowns than there are known unknowns. And I'll let that set for just a second, but I will tell you that the number of unknown unknowns when you're building a startup is really infinite. There's so much that you are not even going to know that you don't know. And I think this is one of the biggest and the most challenging things for brand new entrepreneurs and startups. You're going to get halfway down, you're going to start selling to an enterprise, and they're going to ask you, could you please send me the document that dictates your GDPR policies? And you're going to say, well, I didn't know I needed GDPR policies. Or you're going to work with a company and they're going to say, what's your service level agreement like? And you're going to say, what's a service level agreement? And those are the things that it's really hard to wrap your head around. And that's one of the reasons why I created the Product Founder's Journey and I wrote the book, my book, The SaaS Field Manual, was to try and at least expose people to as many of these concepts as possible. And really what the book is just a glossary. It's an encyclopedia of terms that helps people understand, here's what's coming. If you're not a technical co-founder and you're getting ready to develop your product, and you hire somebody and they say, okay, we're going to use Agile and we're going to be planning this in sprints and we're going to have our daily scrum. Those could be words that you have no idea what they mean. And those are just more unknown unknowns. And if nothing else, take a look at the book. I think it's $5 on my website. If you sign up and want a copy of it, just let me know or send me an email. I'm happy to send it to anybody that's on Venture Cafe or in St. Louis. So the last thing that I will say, and you are only one blank away from blank. And this goes both ways. You might be one contract deal from your first $1 million. And you might also be one contract deal from not making payroll. And I think that this happens a lot with founders, especially folks that are in this 2 or 3 times, when they look back and they say, man, I was just like 1 day, 1 hour, 1 month away from not being able to make payroll. And you know what, we made a phone call, we got to the right person, we talked to procurement, I made a phone call, I made a social media post, and I got one customer to buy my product. So I'm only one thing away from that thing. And I think that that uncertainty is also what makes entrepreneurship and starting companies really challenging. And it goes back to some of those mental health issues that we talked about before, is that if you're not careful, the uncertainty can really affect you. And I don't really want to talk about or go into a lot of detail into what we're feeling and experiencing right now, but I see a lot of founders and just a lot of humans really going through massive amounts of uncertainty today. And as we get into a phase where we think, okay, we kind of got it figured out, and then something else happens, something else changes, and we're faced with more uncertainty. And that uncertainty is really challenging, and it's really emotionally taxing. You kind of have to give up your need for control. And I would tell you this, if you are a control freak, it is going to be a blessing and a curse when you launch your first startup. So with that, again, if you post "Stop Crushing It" to any one of these channels, I would be happy to give away my course to somebody who is posting that today. We do have a couple of questions already in here. Let's see here.
Yes.
Go ahead, Melissa.
No, I just said Stephen Von Rum, who's one of our entrepreneurs in residence, had commented, and I had the same comment on those statistics. I think some of them, the entrepreneurship creates that issue, and some of them, people that are already wired that way are drawn to entrepreneurship. So can you talk a little bit more about that? And Stephen, chime in if I said something about those statistics that are sobering statistics.
They are very sobering statistics. And I would tell you, I'm not going to answer the question directly, because I don't want to say something that I don't know the answer to, and I don't want to make something up. But I do want to bring up this one really interesting thing. There is an article on, I think it's CNN. If you search for entrepreneur and toxoplasmosis, toxoplasmosis is a disease that humans can get from cats, from a cat scratch. And they are toxoplasmosis increases a human's risk factor, or increases their tolerance for risk. So as an example, they say, if you have toxoplasmosis, if you were scratched by a cat as a child and you developed asymptomatic toxoplasmosis, you could potentially have a higher rate to become an entrepreneur, because your brain has fundamentally changed to allow a higher risk tolerance. So I don't know if this is a chicken and the egg thing, and my guess is I believe that it's both. I started off as an entrepreneur, and because we have, at least my experience is that I was selling lemonade on the corner when I was probably 9-10 years old. It's really been in my blood from the beginning. And the level of perfection and the level of striving that we have as entrepreneurs, the perfectionism that comes up, I think that our desire to succeed puts us in a special mental category. And if you study or follow a lot of Brené Brown's work, perfectionism is the thief of joy. Comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that over time, at least for me, it's taken a long time. It's taken 10 years to unwind a lot of the pattern thinking that I developed when I was, really early. I started my career in a company of 6 people. And that like die-hard founder mentality, the crush it mentality, made me think and feel a certain way. It made me think that I had to work 18-hour days and not care about my own mental health. So I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg thing, but I do know that my approach and the way that I have changed my life today by incorporating self-care into my work environment and into those that work around me has dramatically made me a happier person. I will tell you, the last thing that I will mention is, if you go and look at the definition for the American dream, nowhere in the definition of the American dream does it include the word happiness. And I would just ask you as an entrepreneur why you are starting your company. Are you starting it to make $1 million? Are you starting it to be happy, to support your family? Like, what is the reason you want to start? And if it is to be happy, you're going to need to approach it creating your business in a different way than you are reading about on a regular basis on LinkedIn. You are going to have to build self-care into the process. If you don't want to end up in a psychiatric ward or with ADHD at 6 times the likelihood of a non-entrepreneur, you're going to have to build that into the plan, into your business plan from the beginning. So that's what I'll say. Dwight said, thank you, Dwight. I've experienced all of those things. I'm very interested in self-care. So I appreciate a fellow founder who is actually interested. And this is happening more and more. A lot of people are realizing, especially second-time founders, I find, second and third-time founders that built a company and maybe it failed, built a company and they sold it and they're building their second one. This is when they come back and say, man, I don't want to do it the way that I did it before. I want to have more time with my family. I want to be able to take a Saturday off and not think about all of the hundreds of things on my to-do list, because it's challenging to just put it down for a weekend. I have the same problem with it as well, which is the reason why when I take a vacation, I try and go to a country where my phone doesn't work. Because if I can do that and completely check out and turn off, I finally get a little relief. We do have a little time left over. It's about 15 minutes left. So if you have any other questions, stick those in the chat. If not, I might hand it back over to Melissa. I know that she wanted to share a little bit about.
Jill just commented on.
There's a resilience free conference speakers online this week. I'm not sure how
I think it's a free conference. I don't think it's free of resilience. I just want to make sure, right?
Oh, okay.
There is a fast. It's a free conference
about resilience. Gotcha.
Sorry.
That's okay. Commas are important. Do you know where that's at, Jill? Any ideas where people can go to?
It's on my other computer. I'll look and see.
Somebody just asked about favorite books, and if you'll just excuse me, I'm going to pull up something else. Oops, that's the wrong one. Sorry. I have a self-care toolkit. If you go to my website, gbfreeman.com, you can download what I call my self-care toolkit. It has a whole bunch of resources in there for people that want to incorporate self-care into their world. And I will just pull it up because there are a number of really good books inside of there. So let me scroll down to the bottom. You can get access to all of this. Here we go. You can get access to all of this on my website. Just go to gbfreeman.com and go over to the blog. And you can download the self-care toolkit, or it's on there's an option on my homepage. I would tell you that right now, if you are interested in self-care and are not really sure where to start, This is probably the most powerful, and I mean this 100%, the most powerful 6.5 hours of audio that I have ever listened to in my life, really. It is available on Audible, on Amazon. It is Brene Brown. It's 6.5 hours of her work. It's done in person. This came out after she had released her first 2 books, and she went out and did a workshop in front of a live audience, and they trimmed down that workshop and they put it in to this, The Power of Vulnerability. This is an amazing set of content that I probably listen to 2 or 3 times a year. When I'm stuck, when I don't know what exactly I'm feeling, I can listen to this and I will be like, oh, this is where I am in the process right now. And this is what I need to do to help me get out of it. So I would say that that is fantastic. If you want another super fast read, from a self-care perspective, The 4 Agreements is also absolutely one of my favorite books. It's really short. Don Miguel Ruiz is fantastic.
Very little.
The other one that I would tell you is The Untethered Soul is really fantastic. This really gets into mindfulness. The Alchemist is another really kind of feel-good movie, or a feel-good book. And then finally, if you're just looking for some really fantastic creative spirit, Big Magic from Elizabeth Gilbert is also one of my favorites. It's a short read and a lot of fun as well.
Cool. Dan had posted something, GB.
I work with a lot of students and soon-to-be graduates who aspire to be entrepreneurs. Where can I point them to learn the realities of starting a business? I think a lot of people see the glamour and not the hard work. I would be lying if I didn't tell you to send them to productfoundersjourney.com.
You can we'll set them straight at I-10 as well.
Yeah, or send them to I-10. You can sit down with one of us mentors, and as long as the mentors are being like honest, and I think that a lot of them at I-10 are, is that we try and be as honest as we possibly can with people that have these ideas. And again, this is the reason why I call this presentation the Dream Killer presentation, because sometimes people need to, at least for a moment, have a gut check and say, man, this might not be a great idea. You would be amazed at the number of times that I can talk to a founder and jump on a phone call or jump on my iPhone or on my phone and find 5 competitors that are doing exactly the same things that they are doing. And it's just that they haven't looked yet. So, $5, my book is fantastic. Softwarefieldmanual.com or .org. Go there, download the Software Field Manual. That alone will help people provide some context and alleviate a lot of the unknown unknowns. Dwight says, I follow Bob Chapman. People-centric leadership. How do you include self-care for your employees into your company's culture? There is some fantastic, the Emotional Intelligence Institute from Yale University. I can't think, his name's Eric Brackett, maybe. He does a lot of emotional intelligence work in schools. He's created a program called Ruler, and they are adopting emotional intelligence practices in schools. And I would tell you that if you go and look at that program and figure out a way to morph it into company culture, the amount of benefits that emotionally healthy and emotionally intelligent leaders and staff get is enormous. When we feel safe, we can be creative. Everybody wants creative and productive employees. So I believe, this is personal conjecture for me, but I believe that the reason why for the last 50 to 75 years, bosses have said, leave your emotions at the door, like check your emotions at the door and come in and get work done, is because those bosses weren't capable of dealing with those emotions if they did come into the door. So when you are incapable of dealing with your own emotions, you are damn sure incapable of dealing with somebody else's emotions. And if some employee walks into your office and has a meltdown because their pet died, or they have somebody, they have a family member that just lost their job,